Note, all characters, events, and spoken words in this story are fictional, and is not meant to target any specific audience. Feel free to stop reading at any time and read at your own risk. As Xiao Hui listened on to the two bickering voices, she slowly began to snap out of her dazed, dreamy state as she began to recall who those voices belonged to. As the voice gotten closer, Xiao Hui began to hear them clearer and clearer. It was then that Xiao Hui broke out in cold sweat as she recognized the two voices. Problem has came Xiao Hui's way, as those two voices belong to her two stepsisters. Xiao Hui can feel the two voices headed two-way as they got louder and louder. Xiao Hui debated whether to leave her spot, but deep down in her heart she desired to stay for that dreamy prince. However, what the stepsisters' next words were like a chilling wind brushing across Xiao Hui's spine. Are you sure you saw it right? There's no way that cheap servant can be here. We clearly told her to stay home, and we didn't leave any rides behind for her to come with. Although they did look a bit different from afar, I had the feeling it was her, but I'm not too sure after all. How could she afford such an expensive dress? Quote. That is true. How can a cheap servant afford an expensive dress? However, we should still make sure just in case. If it's not her, at least we can become acquainted, for she might become CEO Wangzi's wife. If it is her, I will not let that cheap servant have a good life after we go back. See how I deal with her. What if that cheap servant runs away when she sees us? We'll have the guards break her legs, see where she runs to. It was then that Xiao Hui knew that there was no chance for her to stay, because if she is discovered, not only would she be punished, she might not even live to see CEO Wangzi again. In a moment of fear, Xiao Hui resolutely made the decision to bolt. Quickly running away from her stepsister's voices, Xiao Hui eventually made it to the front of the building after circling around the garden. At this point, Xiao Hui couldn't help but hesitate as she stopped in her tracks. She couldn't help but glance back in melancholy as she realized this episode in her life would be shelved away as a beautiful dream, never to see the light of day. Suddenly, her stepsister's voices snapped her out of her daze as Xiao Hui realized they were actually closing in on her again. Xiao Hui quickly turned around to escape, but with a twist, she tripped on her high heels and fell forward. One of her high heels slipped off and was flinged to the ground towards where the stepsister's voice was coming from. Xiao Hui looked at it with pity before pulling off her other heel and ran off towards the limousine that took her here. Hurriedly getting in, Xiao Hui quickly hid by ducking her head down while the servant guide stared at her with a queer face. Xiao Hui told the guide to wait for Xiao Xianu. It was at this point that the socialites from the banquet began filing out in large numbers, with Xiao Xianu included. Xiao Xianu briskly walked up to the limousine as if to avoid further conversations with the socialites and got in just to find Xiao Hui hiding on the seat. Xiao Hui, what's wrong with you? Xiao Xianu couldn't help but ask as she shut the door. I'm fine. Just a bit tired, Xiao Hui answered meekly. Xiao Xianu nodded in understanding as she said, understandable, didn't expect him to choose you as his dance partner, but I guess that works as a temporary solution. Not long after, the limousine reached the harbors as Xiao Hui and Xiao Xianu boarded the ship once more. Xiao Xianu then chatted on and complained of how annoying all the socialites were. Eventually, they reached land and took the limousine back to the dress shop where Xiao Hui returned her dress even though Xiao Xianu told her to keep it. In the end, Xiao Xianu told Xiao Hui to keep her one glass heel because it wasn't going to sell even if it was returned since Xiao Hui lost the other one. Xiao Hui could only agree as they left the dress shop and headed to the ramen shop once more because Xiao Hui said that it was fine dropping her off there. Tilda, whatever, I only brought you there to eat, but I guess the favor you did could be payment. I'll treat you to ramen next time, Tilda, so do you have a phone I can call you by? Xiao Xianu cheerfully questioned. Xiao Hui shook her head before stating, it's not like it's urgent. How about tomorrow night at this ramen shop? Xiao Xianu smiled once more, Eesh, I guess. Alright, Xiao Hui, see you tomorrow. I'll get a phone for you tomorrow so you better be here. Then, Xiao Xianu waved before the limousine drove off leaving Xiao Hui standing there. Xiao Hui smiled in melancholy as she stood in a daze for a bit while staring at the glass heel in her hands. Then, she carefully hid away the glass heel in her clothes as she made her way back to the mansion. Unknown to Xiao Hui, her other glass heel is now in the hands of her stepsisters who had picked it up while chasing her. Now the two stepsisters were debating what to do with the glass heel as they waited for a guide servant to drive them back to the harbors. The two stepsisters were reporting their suspicions to their mother when they were interrupted by a voice, "That doesn't belong to you. Hand it over." The trio looked over to see CEO Wangzi glaring at the glass heel in their hands. The stepsisters could only helplessly obey as they handed over the glass heel. CEO Wangzi then caressed the glass heel with a gentle smile before his countenance frosted over. He then handed the glass heel to his butler before stating, "Find the one that can wear this glass heel at all costs. She will be my future wife." The butler nodded as he carefully wrapped up the glass heel in cloth. Then CEO Wangzi and the butler strolled off, leaving the stepsisters and stepmother shocked. The next day, there was breaking news as many found out that CEO Wangzi intended to marry the one who could wear the glass heel. A large auditorium was rented where ladies could go to try on the glass heel for the next week. Besides the ladies who attended the ball itself, loads of other ladies all went to line up just for the chance to wear the glass heel. Unfortunately, most ladies' feet seemed to fail to fit in the heel as the shoe size was too small. It makes sense as short people tend to have smaller feet. Xiao Hui also had heard the news, and was raring to go try as well. However, before she could take a step outside of the mansion, her stepmother had sent guards to lock her in her room and even had 2 guards guarding outside her door who only allowed for servants to enter to provide food for Xiao Hui to eat. The stepmother had suspicions that Xiao Hui attended the ball due to her daughter's report, but she couldn't confirm it. But to be on the safe side, she decided to lock up Xiao Hui until the week was over. Xiao Hui was devastated as she stayed locked up in her small room. She could only sneakily pull out her hidden glass heel and stare at it in a daze before smiling in melancholy. All her hopes were dashed as she could only silently sob, especially since she would be missing out on the free bowl of pork belly ramen that Xiao Shanu was going to buy for her to eat. Well, at least no one can wear my small-sized glass heels, Xiao Hui thought optimistically. However, on the 5th day since the glass heel trying sessions, there was another breaking news revealing that the owner of the glass heel has been found. Not only that, CEO Wangzi was already preparing for the wedding ceremony. Xiao Hui was then allowed to leave her room, but Xiao Hui could only live her life in a daze as she realized all her hopes were truly dashed now. Another lady has probably been able to fit her foot into the shoe. It's not too surprising as there are so many ladies out there. How could there not be one with feet size as small as hers? Not only that, CEO Wangzi decided that she was the right one, hence decided to marry her. That was the most important point. The same day that Xiao Hui gained her freedom once more, Xiao Hui could only hug her glass heel and cry herself to sleep at night. The next day, Xiao Hui was back to normal. The past in the past, Xiao Hui believes that she still needs to look forward to tomorrow. Xiao Hui decided to go eat some pork belly ramen to cheer herself up further. Hence, after work that day, Xiao Hui bounced off cheerfully to the ramen shop. It seems she was in luck as the boss still had pork belly left. Hence, Xiao Hui cheerfully sat down to eat her sorrow away. As Xiao Hui was indulging herself, someone sat beside her. The person did not order and simply sat there. At first Xiao Hui did not notice, but the shop seemed to have descended into silence at some point. It was then that Xiao Hui looked up to see the empty shop along, even the boss was gone. Xiao Hui then looked beside her before falling into a daze. Sitting right beside Xiao Hui while staring at her with a gentle smile was CEO Wangzi dressed in casual clothes. Xiao Hui dropped her chopsticks in shock as her eyes widened. How come you're here? For you of course, CEO Wangzi replied as if it was the most natural thing in the world. How did you find me? Xiao Hui couldn't help but ask as she tilted her head to the side. Tee Xiao Hui, that would be due to me. A chirpy voice resounded from the doorway as Xiao Shanu peeked in, but with a glare from CEO Wangzi, Xiao Shanu pouted before bouncing away. Sheesh, I helped Big Brother find his lover and now he runs the bridge right after. Humph, you better hold her tight or I will steal cute Xiao Hui away from you. Xiao Hui continued her questions as she couldn't help but doubt her eyes. But weren't you getting ready to marry to the one who wore the glass heels? You even prepared the wedding. Yes, I have indeed found the one who wore the glass heels, and there could only be one such lady in my life, CEO Wangzi firmly stated. Then, CEO Wangzi got down on one knee as he pulled out a little box, opening it to reveal a diamond ring in the shape of a truffle. I have already gotten the required documents through your father. Xiao Hui, will you allow me to feed you for the rest of your life? Tears of happiness leaked down Xiao Hui's face as she nodded in happiness. As Xiao Hui cried in happiness, she couldn't help but ask as if to confirm her final doubts, how do you know I'm the right one? CEO Wangzi gently caressed Xiao Hui's head as he firmly stated, material objects and physical appearances are not enough as a proof that someone is the right one. Only with my own heart can I prove that you are one I love. Xiao Hui and CEO Wangzi lived happily ever after.